How's it, guys? And welcome back to He's Got Thoughts here on the Arcade Studio Podcast channel. I'm still going on about expertise because that's something that's just been stuck in my head since that Dave Smith and Douglas Murray Rogan experience a couple of weeks back. So it's been there. I've tried to get my thoughts in some sort of coherent order, and I'm curious to see what you guys have to say about it. So please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's get it going down in the comments below. I'm sure you guys are going to tell me all the things I got wrong. So let's have some fun then. So we see positive manifestations of expertise every day. You know, we can tell when somebody knows how to do something or if something is working. Let's say air travel, those planes stay in the air. Pilots are really good. Air traffic control tend to be really good at it. And if something goes and breaks that mechanism and stops the people that really know how to do things from doing their job properly, planes fall out the sky and disasters happen. So, we can really, in the physical world, we can see when something is done expertly. Okay, we need experts in this world. We need people that know how things work. We need, people that understand fluid dynamics. We need people that understand electricity. And basically every single field, every single little micro thing that we need to do, the better the person is that does it, the more hyper-focalized he is or she is on that thing, the better the world will generally work. Okay, that's why, things like the military are so hyper-specialized in certain little things. Okay, because it works better with people know everything there is to know about a certain thing. And then, of course, the bureaucrats come along and they make a mess of everything because nobody's good at being a bureaucrat. Or being good at being a bureaucrat means that you actually do mess things up. So maybe that's the thing. Maybe they are excellent at it. So anyway, I nerded out badly. I really enjoy etymology, the study of words, and went in and had a look at what is expertise, right? It comes from the prefix ex, from Latin, ex, which means out, and perior, which means to risk, to go through, or to try. Okay, so this means that to be an expert, you have to be constantly trying. You have to be constantly doing the thing that you are trying, that you're wanting to study. Okay, so if you are an aeronautical engineer and you stop studying aeronautical engineering, you're only an expert until the point of your study. If anything else that goes on afterwards in the field that you haven't gotten to is beyond your knowledge, and you're no longer an expert in that kind of stuff. So you can build planes until whatever year you stop studying in it, but it's going to be very hard to push it further unless you are experimenting yourself in some way. But that just means that you are pushing yourself to go further and you are trying. So if you stop trying, you stop being an expert. It's fluid in that way. You can come in and go out of it. The risk part of it is also very interesting because it means that you have to have some skin in the game in order for you to be considered an expert or to become an expert at something. You have to be risking at least your reputation, if not your wealth or your life, in order to make sure that you're always, first of all, speaking the truth, because it might be difficult to say what you have to say. And secondly, just to be always on that cutting edge. You have to be right there on the limit. And sometimes you can make a mistake, but if you don't stake your reputation on it and you make a mistake and you don't own that mistake in some way, then you will always be seen as a fraud because you didn't own up to your mistake and you just kept going in that direction, right? So you sort of you need to be risking something in order to be an expert. Okay, so as Sam Harris says sometimes, it's like playing tennis without the net. If you take away the possible reputational damage that you might have by saying stupid things or wrong things or whatever, or even like you could even have some good ideas that are taken in the wrong way in the world. They're taken out of context and they breed other bad ideas, and that's the most dangerous thing, I think. And that's the thing that Douglas Murray was going on about. He's not really he doesn't really care about what the people on the show on the JRE were actually saying. He's worried about what people that are listening to the show and are just looking for excuses to do like terrible things, and how they might take certain ideas and run with them. So right or wrong, I don't know, but I think that's what he was getting at. So you need to have your reputation at stake when you're talking. Otherwise, what's the point? And if you take Dave Smith, for example, because he is 50% of the conversation. In this case, he's his audience came to him because he's a comedian. He's a funny guy. He tells jokes. And then they stayed because they found his political commentary really interesting, and that's why a lot of us listen to comics when they talk about politics and the world in general, because the thing that makes a person a good comedian is also the thing that makes you a good social commentator, because you look at the world in a different way, and these people are generally highly intelligent, so they do figure out interesting ways of explaining their points of views. I mean, George Carlin was the same. There were loads of, Bill Burr is also quite interesting to listen to outside of the comedy. But Dave Smith can't afford to do a non-funny special. That's where his reputation is, that he is who he is because he's a funny comedian. But he can't afford to have bad ideas or ideas that are taken out of context outside, because he can always, go back and hide behind the fact that he is just a comedian and people shouldn't be taking everything he says so literally or seriously, right? I also feel that we sort of missed the point with the whole credentialism discussion, because degrees don't make you an expert in any way. They're the start. They're a starting point of expertise. But people have got on against Murray about only having an English major, and so why is he able to talk about wars and whatever else he goes on about? And apart from the fact that most journalists have a major in the language that they're writing in, because that's more or less how you become a journalist. You want to write, so you learn how to write by going and studying the language that you're going to write in. English if you're in English speaking country, Italian if you're in Italy, Spain Spanish, whatever. So most of the people that I know that are journalists have that sort of background, and it makes sense, because if you want to write, you need to know, who the greatest writers are in your field and in your language, and see how they did things, and really build up on that and become a great writer. So maybe at the end of the course, you're a really expert writer, but you're not an expert journalist, and you're not an expert at anything that you're going to be writing about. So then you go and hyper-focalize on whatever is interesting to you at the time. It could be, in Murray's case, geopolitics or migration or war or whatever it might be. And then you embed yourself in that world. You go and understand what the people are talking about. You speak to other people that have been through the situation. You look at as many sources as possible that are talking about it. You study war as a global thing as well, like as a total subject. You go and see the old wars, the wars of the Romans, the wars of the Greeks. As far back as you can go, you understand what war is, and then you go and speak about it. Okay, of course, you'll never be as 100% competent as somebody who only does that. But if you have enough experience in it, you can become expert enough to actually go and then write a book. And then it depends on, once you've written the book, will you be an expert forever? No, of course not. You're going to be an expert until the point that you wrote the book. If you don't carry on studying that world, that landscape, let's say we're talking about Israel right now. If now that he's written the book, if he doesn't keep on going to Israel and understanding what his point of view of Israel is, then maybe in time, he'll cease to be a credible source of information. Okay, and of course, he's going to have his blind spots like everybody, and he's going to have his biases, and that's why you should never just base all your information on just one single expert. You should go to 4 or 5. That's why I thought the Dave Smith and him would have had a really interesting conversation, which they ended up doing, but not on the topics that I thought they were going to be discussing. And I thought they were going to be a little bit more jovial, not jovial, but more friendly about it, try to actually understand the things. But I think the fact that Joe insisted that Dave be there really pushed Murray the wrong way, and I think he thought that he was in need of a babysitter sort of thing, and that he was dangerous and didn't enjoy that being viewed that way, right? Um, and I think also he didn't enjoy being, if he considers himself an expert in what he's written about, and he's done the research and been there and whatnot, and then basically they said, well, your counterpoint is this comedian who is reading a lot about the stuff and he has his ideas, but and they're putting him on the same level, and I think he sort of resented that, which, I mean, I probably would have resented it too if, as a photographer of 20 years, they put me on a panel and to talk about AI, and on the other side there's like somebody that is, like 1 year into photography, and maybe very, very talented and very, very good and has good ideas, but doesn't have the wealth of experience that maybe I have, or whatever. Yeah. It's about being thin-skinned. I think we talked about in the last one. There was a little bit of too like thin skin in that whole debate, in general. But anyway, that's besides the point. We're talking about expertise here. So yeah, one great example of a non-credentialed expert is James Cameron. I mean, he didn't study filmmaking. He studied physics at school. He didn't even finish his physics degree, and he wanted to make movies, so he started working his way up all the way from the bottom, mainly in the special effects department, and learned how to write movies, learned how to direct, and finally, when he was ready to actually make his real directorial debut, he came out with Terminator, which basically changed filmmaking forever. But that's because, you don't need a degree. You just need, like, bloody mindedness and fully immersing yourself in a subject and surrounding yourself by people that know a lot more than you do about something, and you can become an expert at that. You try, you fail, you try again, until it works, and it's better if you're trialing and failing on somebody else's dime, of course. Yeah, and then once he made his movies and he made his money, he got onto another love of his, which was deep sea exploration. Again, he doesn't have a degree in nautical engineering or anything like that. He just understands maths and physics, and enough to understand if he's going in the right direction or not. Probably surrounded himself again by experts, and now is one of the foremost experts in deep sea diving and filmmaking at depth. Definitely, you go to him rather than going to the guys at Ocean Gate. That's for sure. And once he was asked, I saw this in an interview, why he was so confident about his about going down as deep as he does, and he's like, well, because I designed the escape vehicle, and I know that I want to survive, and so he made his plans, and the fact that he is still alive and doing something that is as dangerous as he does. Is testament to his knowledge on the subject, I guess. That's another physical representation of his expertise. Now, this can all lead to hubris quite easily, because if you just think that you know everything all the time, and that you're the best, and everything you touch turns to gold, then you get to phrases like "I am the science," and we all know how that can explode in your face if you're not careful. This is where the risk part of the thing comes into the game, because an expert can't just spout off on anything without putting their reputation on the line, and that makes that's where there needs to be accountability in some way. There have to be checks and balances. Other experts should be called in to talk to what you have to say, and that'll should keep you grounded. That's why you should never have one person that is put up as the person and everybody else has to pull him down. There should be sort of like a committee of people that don't think alike and are as heterogeneous as possible with their ideas, in so that they can sort of fight, and the best ideas will come out and win, in theory anyway. But we all know that, of course, sometimes that isn't exactly the case. So yeah, your reputation, an expert's reputation, should be the thing that's on the line when they express an idea. And we saw this in COVID, people making huge declarations, and then they would hide behind caveats or even behind presidential pardons. And how many people are ever going to trust Fauci ever again? Or will everybody trust Frank Dibble if Graham Hancock's theories are proven correct, or vice versa? Will anybody trust Graham Hancock if Frank Dibble is proven is confirmed to be the right way of doing things? So I'll tell you what will happen, to these people, because it's happened before. There's a guy called Cesare Cremonini, which if you Google him, you'll find the Italian pop star, right? But he was actually Galileo Galilei's greatest rival and one of the most famous and most important philosophers of his time. He was a professor at the University of Padua. This guy was an Aristotelian, which meant that he believed in the perfect form of objects. Like the moon had to be a perfect sphere, otherwise it couldn't be a moon, right? Along with other sort of dogmatic ideas along that. And he refused to look through Galileo's telescope. So he stopped trying, basically. He just decided that he knew everything there is to know, and that whatever this upstart was coming with was not useful information. But all it would have taken him was a quick look through that to understand that there are craters on the moon and that it's not a perfect sphere, and he would have probably had the intelligence to put everything that he knew into doubt and figure out a new way of expressing his ideas. He would have been pushing knowledge forward rather than holding it back. And this guy was literally like one of the most important intellectuals of his time. Okay, and up until Galileo, the ideas that were coming out of Padua were the right ones, for the knowledge of the time. Like they did lead to a betterment of humankind. They led to Galileo. Galileo was also professor there at the University of Padua. So, the ideas were stepping stones to betterment of the humankind. Okay, you just can't stop at any stepping stone, because if you stop, you'll never get to the top. Right? And then Galileo was killed because he refused to back down from his ideas, and Cremonini died at the age of 60-something from plague. But if you search Cremonini, I 100% guarantee you will find a horrible Italian pop song. And you have to add Galileo to the search bar to find out anything about him. So I guess that's what happens if you have too much hubris and you claim to be an expert, right? So that, I think, is what makes an expert. Someone that's always striving as much as possible and putting their ideas up to the toughest scrutiny, that is never backing down from an examination, and always pushing their ideas up against a brick wall to see if they stand up, and is experiencing their own skin as much as possible in their chosen field of expertise. And most importantly, is staking their reputation on the words that they say. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll catch you the next time. See ya. Remember to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the comments down below. Bye.